Welcome back, you all, to CHD 210, Educating Exceptional Children. This week, we're going to be talking about Chapter 2, which is Instructional Strategies Supporting the Inclusion of Young Children with Special Needs. The field of early childhood special education embraces the philosophy of developmentally appropriate experiences in the least restrictive environment. However, experience has shown us that to ensure success, general early education teachers and early childhood special education teachers must all learn the specific strategies and techniques necessary for accommodating and supporting children with special needs in community-based settings. This chapter is going to present an overview of these techniques and strategies. The role of the early childhood education teachers tends to focus more on organizing and managing the environment and materials while encouraging children to participate in those environments. To ensure that children with special needs fully benefit from the early childhood education environment, teachers may need to orchestrate children's experiences more directly. For some early childhood education teachers, this may require taking a more active role than they may otherwise have done. So, as we stated earlier, the law requires that students with disabilities have the right to access and participate in general education curriculum. General curriculum is defined as the same curriculum that students without disabilities are using. In the United States, there is no official preschool general education curriculum because public schools are not required to serve preschool children without disabilities. So let's talk about the difference between adaptations and accommodations. Now, you're going to hear these two terms along with another term, modification, all the time in the world of education. So let's clear it up and make sure that you understand. First of all, remember IDEA, that was the latest law that we talked about in Chapter 1. The term adaptation does not even appear in the IDEA law. Adaptation, however, is referred in a very broad range to the ways in which curriculum goals, activities, materials can be changed and individualized to ensure a child's participation and learning in the general education classroom. Although the law doesn't actually define adaptations or modifications, they seem to sometimes be used interchangeably. However, as I said, there is a very, very big difference between the two. Accommodation, however, is more likely to be used in reference to something a child uses to participate in the same activities as typical children and achieve and demonstrate classroom goals, like a wheelchair. Using equipment like a wheelchair or walker for a child who's non-ambulatory. Maybe attaching a specifically designed paintbrush to a child's hand with Velcro. That might be an accommodation. Using assistive technology to enable a child to communicate or turn on a battery-operated toy. That would be an accommodation. So, something a child uses to participate is an accommodation. Modification refers to changing the curriculum goals in some way. For example, a child with a more complex intellectual disability might have a modified goal that they would actually draw circles and lines with crayons or markers, or maybe a paintbrush. Maybe they would just learn to write the first letter in their name rather than independently writing their whole name. So a modification means where you change a curriculum goal in some way from what the general education children may be expected to do. I hope that clears that up for you all. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Let me go back. I went to one too many. You will notice right here in on this screen, zone of proximal development. Now, we talk about this in lots of child development classes about Lev Vygotsky, and this is a theory that has been proven helpful in working with young children with special needs because it emphasizes the importance of assisting children's learning through social mediation of the environment. And like I said, Vygotsky, he was the person that developed the concept of zone of proximal development. And that just simply means that this is a range of performance within which children can function if they have support from another individual. And we call that support that they get from another individual scaffolding. And this term is used to refer to that just that right amount of support that the child needs to perform a task. Doing it again and again, the importance of a routine. Two strategies, predictable routines and planned transitions, can foster a learning environment for children with special needs. Children with special needs, consistency in their daily routine makes it so much easier for them to learn than in a chaotic or unpredictable environment. So what we're saying is getting a schedule, sticking with it. All children really are more successful when they experience a predictable routine that is consistent and varies only when there's a special event or an activity. So this is one of those places where not only does a predictable routine benefit a child who may have special needs, but also a child who's just typically developing. Also, transitions. It's important that there are clear cues that signal transitions from one activity to the next. Children with special needs often find transitions stressful and very difficult. And that is simply because they're unsure of what's going to happen next. So creating routines for a transition can be very helpful for children who may have difficulty with transitions from one activity to the next. So examples that you can do to prompt children and let them know that something else, that the schedule is about to change or we're about to move to the next thing, is just simply holding up a sign, maybe playing a specific song or singing a song, ringing a bell, turning the lights off and on, just coming up with that cue that lets them know, okay, we're about to move from center time to get packed up to go home, or we're about to move from circle time to get ready to go outside for snack. Those types of things, just giving them that cue so it just doesn't catch them off guard. Talking to children, of course, makes a huge difference. One of the most interesting discoveries in recent years is the extent to which adult communication can play an important role in children's development. For children with learning challenges, adult communicative input can often make or break the child's chances for optimizing learning potential. So the single most important communication strategy is to respond to the child's attempts to communicate and to talk about things that interest the child. Simply follow the child's lead. Take their lead. Let them tell you, let them guide it. Another communicative strategy is using appropriate pacing. And what we're talking about with pacing is the rate of speaking and the length of pause between your sentences. Teachers who vary their pace can create different moods and add interest to their spoken language. Many children with disabilities have difficulty processing rapidly incoming information. Their comprehension and interest can often be enhanced by slowing down the pacing of complex or new information. One thing that we want to I want to bring to your attention, and we're going to talk about this more in chapter 5, is probably one of the most common child characteristics that results and failed placement is disruptive behavior. And we bring that up here. That is because although any child can develop disruptive behaviors, children with special needs may present these sorts of behaviors more often than typically developing children. Sometimes certain disabilities may be more likely to lead to the development of behavior challenges if they're not handled effectively. Now let's talk about what's the difference in a low incident disability and a high incident disability. Okay, so we're talking about low incidence disabilities. That means that it affects a smaller number of your population. Okay, so we're talking about visual impairment, blindness, autism, hearing loss, children being deaf. Those are low incidences. You are less likely to have that in your classroom than high incident disabilities. Okay, that means they occur with greater frequency. Sometimes we refer to high incident disabilities as mild to moderate disabilities. They may be like mild cognitive impairment, intellectual disability, that kind of thing, mild speech and language delay, non-compliant behaviors. So those are the things that we talk about that we would see more in our classrooms. Okay, we see them more frequently. So thank you for joining me for chapter 2. I know sometimes these videos can get a little long and wordy because this subject matter is a little bit more difficult possibly than what we're used to seeing in our other classes, but I just want to make sure that you understand especially terms that you're going to hear frequently when you get into the classroom. So thanks again for joining me for chapter 2, and I'll see y'all again next week.